Welcome to our showcase today on research and on the launch of the Centre for Research in Eating and Weight Disorders, or CREW for short, and the associated BRC theme. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. As always with any of these events, the first thing I need to do is to announce some housekeeping points, even though you all will have heard this endless times before. So keep your phones on silent, please, during the talks. Nearest toilets are hidden away in the bowels of the building, on the side somewhere, up the stairs across the mezzanine. And if the fire alarm rings continuously, leg it out of that door at the front. I think there is another one into the car park. Okay, enough of the housekeeping points. We've put together for you a singing and dancing program and lots of interactive activities. We're aiming really to bring together science, arts and lived experience here today. So the day involves senior and junior researchers in the program and some of our wonderful lived experience experts, Tallulah and Bella here at the front. Welcome to both of you. Visual minutes by Woven Inc. Our long-term collaborators, Jess and Isolde, are here in the corner. They are also doing an interactive mural to which you will all be able to contribute in the mezzanine during the lunch break. Lunch is on your own, and during the lunch break you can explore lots of art installations, engage in pop-up workshops, explore VR body mapping, take part in the interactive mural and listen to music by our colleague Huberta Simmerich. And you can also find out a lot more about our research. I should also welcome the mental elves, embodied here by Nora Trompeter, who will tweet during the day. And I'm now going to hand over to Matthew Hotopf, our Dean, to say a few words.
Well, thanks very much, Ulrike. I think it's fantastic to be here and to sort of celebrate incredible effort, actually, of work in eating disorders, and it's something which is dear to my heart, I guess, because I'm interested in the sort of interface between physical health and mental health, and you can't think of a disorder which actually encapsulates that better than the eating disorders, and a disorder which is disorders which are more kind of deserving of real support. I mean, money support in terms of research efforts and clinical care, which isn't always the story. I mean, eating disorders are the mental disorders of the biggest mortality, and that's saying something because most of our disorders have an unacceptably high mortality, and that affects eating disorders even more so. So it's a really serious matter, but it's also something we are, I guess, celebrating today, and I think in a way what Ulrike and team have pulled together exemplifies a lot of the things which I'm really keen on making happen in the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience more generally, and I think they could be encapsulated by a number of different kind of components. One is this integration of clinical practice and research, and this is in a way one of the examples when I'm talking to colleagues in SLAM about what's the benefit of the relationship, the special relationship between the university and the hospital. This is one of the ones I will always pull out, that it is absolutely integrated. You have people who are clinicians, professors at the head of their game who do both, and lead teams which do both and integrate that in a very inspiring way. So that's one of the components which makes it dear to my heart. Another is that we've, as Ulrike's already mentioned, we've a very strong partnership with people with lived experience of disorders, and I think that will kind of be seen throughout the day, but is absolutely critical because of the nature of these disorders, the way they affect people in terms of, it's not just a question of putting on, helping people overcome certain aspects of their eating disorders. These disorders affect all sorts of aspects of life, and actually getting that perspective is really important. Then I think that the other aspect of this is the way in which it is so interdisciplinary. I mean, you're going to hear about genomics and the hippocampus, and you're going to hear about art and service user experience. You're going to hear about carers. You're going to hear about therapies. So it is that kind of bringing together of a whole range of different disciplines, which is in a way, I think, what makes this place so exciting and makes this day so exciting. So the history of this, in a way, it's good to see the BRC, Maudsley BRC, sort of on there. This was something which I was BRC director until August, and one of the things I'm proud of having done was actually say, because eating disorders don't get very much in terms of research income from most research funders, we would actually build a research theme within the Maudsley BRC, and that's gone from strength to strength thanks to Ulrike and Sylvain's leadership, and something which I think is absolutely exemplifies by what you're going to hear today. And there has been a fantastic kind of history of work on eating disorders here, which we're going to hear about from Ulrike in a moment, but some of the very early trials in terms of showing that family therapy made a real difference, particularly to adolescents with anorexia. I remember when I was a trainee, these things were pretty new and very exciting, but they were new and exciting because actually these were randomized trials of complex interventions in areas which had been seen often to be quite challenging to actually intervene and make a difference in, and yet they have, and that's become standard practice. And what we've seen more subsequently is that for REF, so REF, for those of you lucky enough not to know what REF is the way in which universities get assessed on their research, and I was responsible for putting our application into REF. And you have to show not just that you do fantastic research, you get published, and you do it in a wonderful environment where we try and look after our early career researchers and do things which are strategically useful, but also that you have impact. And impact means doing something which has an effect outside of the ivory tower of academia. And eating disorders, it's very easy actually to find impact in eating disorders. And we had a debate about whether we should put in 1 or 2 impact case studies last time round. We put in 1, but we made it very strong by having it as a single, very powerful one. And is that right? Have I got that wrong? I have got that right. Yeah, having a ghastly moment from I thought for a moment that we put in 2 and not 1. But that indicates the kind of depth and breadth and scope of this work. And so I'm delighted we've got such a fantastically large audience, and I'm hoping that you're going to have a wonderful day. I have to finish with a slight apology, which is I end up, since I've become dean, I find myself opening things and then not hearing the rest of them. But I hope to catch up because this is being digitized, right? Yeah. So I'm gonna flee shortly after Ulrike's presentation. But thank you all very much and good luck.
Thank you very much, Matthew. So for the next 20 minutes or so, before you hear from all our wonderful speakers, I thought I'd take you back to the beginning and look with you at how we got to where we are now and also why we need our centre. And I put it to you that for the last 150 years or so, we here in South London have been the epicentre of eating disorders research, and IoPPN, together with the Maudsley, at the heart of all of this. So how did it all start? It started with what I'd call the era of the old white men. Starting in the 1870s with William Gull, forward to the 1930s, John Ryle, 1960s, Arthur Crisp, and then the 1970s, our very own Gerald Russell, here opening the IoPPN library with a rose in his lapel and the Queen Mother by his side. So why are we still talking about these old geezers? Because they've given us some really important early insights and impacts. So the men from Guy's first, William Gull and John Ryle. So William Gull put anorexia nervosa on the map. He first described it, And he and John Ryle made really important clinical observations. Firstly, onset is both during adolescence, but also in emerging adulthood. Gull also observed that aspects of anorexia are highly valued, highly rewarding, and that hyperactivity is a core feature. And both these features have led to a lot of biological research based on these observations. All the animal models are to do with activity and overactivity in anorexia. And both of these men already 150 years ago emphasized the need for early intervention, a topic dear to my heart. Fast forward to the 1960s, Arthur Crisp, then at St. George's, took a somewhat different approach. He looked at anorexia from a psychological angle and talked about weight phobia as central, perhaps anorexia being a morbid reaction to puberty. And he also did really important early studies on mortality, showing that in areas where there are specialist units, outcomes are much better. He also, in the latter part of his career, did studies on mental health stigma, all mental health disorders, but including eating disorders, and showing how very stigmatized eating disorders are to this day. Coming on then in the 1970s to Gerald Russell, of course, he put bulimia nervosa on the map. He did work on treatment of bulimia, but he is very well known for his seminal studies, which Matthew has already mentioned, on family therapy of anorexia, work he's done with George Schmuckler, a previous dean, and Ivan Eisler, who's here in the audience. And he's also done a lot of really important work on long-term outcomes, showing that it's never too late to get better. People can get better after many years of illness. Of course, I also need to mention Hubert Lacey, also from Southwest London, St. George's, who put multi-impulse bulimia on the map, a subgroup of people with bulimia with impulsive features, and generally making the point that bulimia is very related to other impulse control disorders. Now, fast forwarding to the 1980s, the first woman appears on the scene, and she brings neurobiology into the unit, none other than our lovely Janet Treasure, who started as Gerald Russell's registrar, but soon got an MRC fellowship into twin genetics. And this was the beginning of a long, fruitful collaboration with geneticists, with David Collier for many years, now with Jerome, who will talk to us later. A second line of early neurobiological research was into neuroendocrine studies. And this was a collaboration between Janet and this young man here, Ian Campbell, who is also going to chair the next session and speak later. And I joined the group in the late 1980s. I hardly dare to show you this picture. Such a dreadful perm and owl glasses. Let's move on. Okay, so the next 25 years I would describe as an era of growth and collaboration. By then, Kate Chanturia had joined us, who is an experimental psychologist, expert in neurocognition. And she's here in the picture, flanked by these two promising young men. One of them, Rudolf Uher, who did his PhD with us, did some of the early neuroimaging studies. He's now a professor in Canada. And Andreas Karvautz, an Austrian fellow who's now professor in Vienna. And this was a period where there were loads of innovative, large-scale collaborative endeavours going on in the unit, funded by the EU in those days, and also a bit later by NIHR. Lots of multidisciplinary work involving genetics, epigenetics with colleagues in the SGDP, John Mills, neuroimaging, working with Steve Williams and colleagues, and on neurocognition. And this work was also across child and adult eating disorders, and of course with lots of national and international collaborators. In parallel, we saw during this time a real growth in clinical outpatient services. And this led us to become very interested in development and testing of theory and mechanism-based complex interventions. And also it led us to explore scalable and technology-based interventions. And a little bit about that. I want to say here, because in the 1990s, Janet and I wrote Getting Better Bite by Bite. It was one of the very first self-help books based on CBT principles for people with bulimia. Here is a later version which we updated with a lived experience expert. But from about 2000 onwards, we also became interested in online guided self-help interventions delivered via the computer, and we've done lots of trials. We had lots of funding from the MRC, from the EU to carry out such trials. And based on all this work into guided self-help, the first and the most recent NICE guidelines both recommend guided self-help as the first-line treatment for people with bulimic disorders. Nowadays, of course, we use app-based interventions, and Karina is going to talk about that in a bit. Yes, so during this period, there was one really important big grant that I need to mention. It was an NIHR program grant we got called Ariadne. It was in the first tranche of NIHR program grants that they ever did. It was on treatment of anorexia nervosa. We did it in collaboration with BEAT, the patient care organization, and we threw everything we had at it. And in fact, a visiting NIHR panel noted its very high value to the NHS. We did 5 clinical trials as part of it on prevention, on cognitive remediation, carers interventions, first-line individual treatment for adults called Mantra, and on online relapse prevention. We produced multiple intervention manuals for patients and carers. We wrote over 100 papers, and we had 12 successful PhD students, one of them shown here, none other than Dr. Helen Sharp, who will speak to us later. I need to mention 2 impacts that came from this grant, and the first relates to the work stream on adolescents with eating disorders, led by Ivan and colleagues. And at the center of it, there was a very good PhD student, Jen House, who led what's called the London Care Pathway Study, where she looked at which were the areas where there were specialist services and which were the areas where adolescents were seen in ordinary camps. And what was found is that case identification was much better in areas with specialist teams. Hospitalizations were much lower in areas with specialized team, but the average cost was 2.5 times higher in those areas without specialist teams. And this piece of research was a really important cornerstone in the government's decision. It was a condemned government under David Cameron, and they gave 150 million pounds to transform services for children and adolescents. The second impact concerns Mantra, the individual therapy that we had developed here for adults with anorexia nervosa. And during this program, we conducted a large-scale multi-center trial on this intervention. And on the basis of this, NICE decided that Mantra should be a first-line treatment for anorexia nervosa, and this was recommended in the 2017 guidance. Since then, we've been given money by Health Education England to train all the therapists in England in Mantra, and we also have a training website. Now, none of this work would have been possible without very close collaboration with our clinical colleagues at the Maudsley. And there are far too many people to mention, but I just want to mention 4. There's first of all Danielle Glennon, whose infectious enthusiasm and energy just pulls you along. Next to her, there is Nicola Kern, who is simply a rock, consultant colleague at the Maudsley, and Karina Allen, who elegantly switches between research and clinical work. But who's the 4th woman? She organized us all to go on an overnight moonwalk for breast cancer, but she always hovers in the back. So I thought I need to show her here, thanks to Danny. This is none other than our current service lead, Caroline Norton, who was recognized by staff as an inspiring leader at their staff awards. She's not here today, I think, because she always firefights and has more important things to do than to sit around in research meetings, as you can see there. And she's got a brilliant sense of humor, especially when the going gets tough. So thank you, Caroline. The last word about the power of clinical academic collaboration. Many of you will know that we have worked in our unit for the last 10 years to bring early intervention to young people with eating disorders, and will know about our FREED program, which has recently been rolled out all over England with the help of the Academic Health Sciences Network. Here we are as a clinical academic team at the BMJ Awards, where we won Team of the Year in 2017. And we're now up for an HSJ award next week. Wish us luck. So coming on now to the more recent past and going forward. Some years ago, 7 years ago, I think, this serious-looking man joined us, Hubertus Himmerich. He came from Leipzig. He brought with him expertise in obesity, depression, neuroinflammatory processes, and he's a wonderful addition to the team. He's a reader in psychiatry of eating disorders. But the last 5 years, and Matthew has already mentioned this, we were blessed by having the BRC theme first on obesity and eating disorders, now on eating disorders and obesity, which Sylvain and I lead. And this has really allowed us to turbocharge our translational research. It's led to multiple new interdisciplinary collaborations. It's allowed us to focus much more on personalized and precision interventions, such as neuromodulation, but also new medications. And it's allowed us to leverage substantial new funding. Now, in the middle of all of this, COVID, of course, struck, the shadow pandemic of eating disorders, big rise of new cases. And this has exposed a lot of health inequalities and has highlighted underserved groups and their intersectionality. And one of the big grants that we were able to leverage based on some of the BRC collaborations is the Edify grant. It's a program grant funded by UKRI to the tune of £4 million. And its aim is to help shape a fresh approach to eating disorders, to bring together arts, humanities and sciences to develop personalized care. And you will see here, we have visual minutes made by Tallulah, who is here at the front, one of our youth advisors of our last Edify meeting. In the course of the day, Sylvain, who will talk in the next session, will talk a bit about what's in workstream 2. This is a workstream focusing on risk. Later on, Helen Sharp will talk about the story study, which we're doing in collaboration with Richard Dobson, Amos Folarin here, and the radar team. And it's all on recovery processes. Over lunch, you can hear from our colleagues from Glasgow School of Art, who are doing a pop-up workshop on lived experience and the intersectionality of underserved voices. And later on, Ian Campbell will talk about neuromodulation approaches, which is part of our new treatments bit at the end. Now, I need to also mention a little bit about training. We are doing a lot of training in this unit. Firstly, training clinicians. On the strength, I think, of our research work, we've been entrusted with training all the eating disorder teams in the whole of England. We've obtained Health Education England funding for a 6-year training program of all teams. It's called EDSA. This is led by a consortium from King's and SLAM under the auspices of Maudsley Learning. The curriculum has been co-designed with experts by experience. So Jess Griffiths is the brilliant leader of this group. We deliver 8 training days per year, plus mentoring, and when we're done, we will have trained about 2,000 clinicians. The program is accompanied by a PhD student, Kat Novogrudsky, who is somewhere in the audience, and she's recently done some work on what people think about the training. And you can see the quote here: "The most enjoyable training I've ever had. This has further added to my passion for eating disorders. And the other quote is about it's an inspiring training. And also the person said, I fully identified with feeling morally injured as a clinician in our shadow pandemic because the quality of care has suffered. And this person said today, and looking ahead to future training days, feels like a soothing balm towards healing the injury individually and systemically. But of course, we also train the researchers, and this is a really important job, training the next generation. We currently have a very healthy number of PhD students, 24 of them in the group. We've previously trained over 120 doctoral students, and many of them are academic leaders now, having grown into strong trees. So I've told you a lot about all the wonderful things that have been happening in this unit, but how do we compare with people elsewhere? And to talk about this, I'm citing Expertscape. They use PubMed data to rank institutions and individuals. And you can see we are listed there under University of London, King's, IoPPN and Maudsley, all at the top. So we are world leading. And so why do we need a centre? And this brings me almost to the end. Well, the really important thing is to say the research landscape in eating disorders has been arid, very arid, nationally and internationally. And a recent report by an all-party parliamentary group on eating disorders research funding in the UK showed that we've been shamefully underfunded for many, many years. Out of keeping with all other mental disorders, out of keeping with the burden of these disorders. In response to this, UK funders have clubbed together to invest £4 million, just over, in eating disorder research networks, one of them led by Jerome and Karina here, another one led by Edinburgh, Fiona Duffy and Helen Sharp and colleagues. So there are some green shoots, but a lot more needs to be done, and we are really at the forefront of it. So that's why we need crew. And here is a tentative mission statement before I finish. We want to address questions that matter to all affected by eating and weight disorders, and we want to provide the culture, the critical mass, the expertise and infrastructure to really accelerate the depth, quality and speed of knowledge generation. And we want to have the agility to respond to new societal challenges such as food insecurity, and new opportunities, horizon funding, new technologies. We also want to strengthen our existing collaborative networks with research, clinical and lived experience partners. And most importantly, we want to produce the next generation of research leaders in eating and weight disorders and influence the UK-wide research strategy. So with that, I finish. A big thank you to all our funders, our partners and collaborators, and all our experts by experience. Thank you.